Hello, my name is Laura Lynn, and we are here today to teach you how to make this beautiful magnetic bracelet. It's using crystal passion beads with some silver spacers, and it is a really simple and easy way to wear your bracelets. This is a great project because just for upcoming spring sales or events if you're doing anything, but also because you can just change out the colors and the shapes and use it for any occasion that's coming. We do have a variety of colors that you can change these into, and so the possibilities are endless. So these are the items that you will be needing today, and you can find a list of the materials in the description below. There will be a link for you there. Okay, so let's get started here. So for beginners, you will be needing about 16 inches of Accu-Flex. This is kind of considered a double strand because we do split the Accu-Flex in the middle there. So to get started, we're going to go ahead and put your Accu-guard onto your Accu-Flex. And while I'm doing this, if you would like to share or like this video in the comments below, that would be great. It'll let your friends and family know what we're doing, and they can come and check out this video too. Also, if you subscribe to it, we will let you know when we have upcoming videos. And if you actually sign up for emails, you will get a free ebook project. So after I got my Accu-guard on, you want to put your crimp bead on. Here you can pretty much use any crimp bead that you like. I personally like sterling silver crimps. They're very malleable and nice to get the finished product that you need. But we have crimp beads in every metal that we carry too. So what I'm trying to do, you're going to use my crimpers. If I can get it in there. Here we go. You want to make sure you're pulling on it as you crimp it to make sure that Accu-Flex is nice and tight. And now we're going to rotate to go ahead and close it up. So for this project, as I mentioned, I did use crystal passions in here, but we have a variety of different crystals that you can use. We have crystal passions, we have preciosa and celestials, all of them which you can find at our website, firemountaingems.com. What I'm trying to do right now is getting this crimp to hang on tightly. Okay. So now that I got my crimp, I want to put a crimp cover on it, and in the description there will be a link there to show you how to do the crimps and also how to put a crimp cover on, because it can be a little tricky if you've never done it before. And give me a moment here. Make sure you keep the crimp inside the crimp cover. Also, I did use Accu-Flex for this project, but we have also various different types of stringing materials, which you can find at our website. Sorry about this. I do like crimp covers. They kind of give you a finished look, and they also can be used. Basically, a crimp cover works as mimics having a bead there. So this pattern is very simple. We are basically going to be putting a crystal, and for every crystal I put on, I'm going to put a little silver spacer bead. And once you get the first pattern in here, it just repeats itself. For this particular bracelet and length, I did it 6 times. And then when I'm doing the rondelles, that's the time when you're going to be putting both of these little Accu-Flex to the bead. One trick of the trade is, especially when you're trying to put 2 pieces of wire into a small hole, is cut your Accu-Flex at an angle. And it kind of makes a little point at it, so it'll make it easier for you to get that into your bead. Especially when you see me try to bead on these tiny, tiny little beads. So we're going to start with the rondelle, because my crimp cover already acts as my silver bead spacer. And now I'm going to put a spacer on here. So once I put the spacer after the rondelle, I actually am going to separate the 2 wires, because I'm going to add the bicones separately. That's how I make that little opening here on the bracelet. And as I mentioned, for every crystal I put on a spacer bead. Just remember that as you're stringing it, and you'll get the pattern every time. So I do 3 crystals on each side of the Accu-Flex, separated by the silver beads. Okay. And then also I will show you as I get this other side on there. It's a little tricky when you're trying to get this to make that opening there, because the beads, you're going to have to make the beads go where you want them to, not where they want to go. Oh my goodness. There we go. As I mentioned earlier in this video, please, if you have a few moments, go ahead and like and share this video. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. We'll be happy to answer them. And if you haven't shared your email with us yet, you may want to go ahead and do that, because we currently are giving out an ebook project for those of us who share your email. Okay, so as I was mentioning, these beads naturally, one bicone wants to go down there. Well, you're wanting both of them to be right next to the silver bead, so you're going to want to like spread it apart like this. And then I am going to put the other silver bead, because they're going to be joined here in a second. Right, the silver bead right before the rondelle and after rondelle will have both Accu-Flex strings going through it. Okay. And here's where we just kind of have to make it go where you want it to. And then what I do is I will make sure this bead goes all the way down where it needs to, because it likes to move on you. And you kind of like press it together and push the beads together so that you get the shape that you want. And that's basically, I'm trying to get both bicones to be right up against that silver bead. Okay? You're going to keep working on this as you're going along, and before you crimp it at the other end, we will make sure everything's where it needs to go. As I go along, I will keep checking this along, but as I mentioned earlier in this video, I will be repeating this section 6 times in the video, and I will come right back and show you how to finish this off. Okay, now that, welcome back. Now that I've done at least 5 sections, I'm going to do one more section. I mentioned earlier in the video, we did 6 of these for the length of this bracelet. So let me do that one more section, and then I will show you how to terminate this bracelet. Okay, so now we're on our last section here. I've added, after the spacer bead, I separated the Accu-Flex, added 3 crystals separated by a spacer bead, and now I'm going to bring them back together through that last silver bead there. And as I mentioned earlier, before we finish it off, we're going to make sure that all of these little openings are the way you want them. As I mentioned, you kind of squish them together as you push that silver bead in to get it to kind of make a square or an oval. There we go. Let me add my last rondelle, and then we will add our Accu-guard, and before I crimp it, I will make sure that all of these are the way they need to be. Your Accu-Flex, when you're crossing them like that, they can kind of, as you can tell, get turns. You just want to kind of straighten them out, and we'll do that here in a moment. Okay, so when you are terminating the bracelet, you're going to add the things in reverse. So you're going to add your crimp bead first, and make sure that both Accu-Flex strands go through it. Okay, now the Accu-guard. I'm actually only going to add one of the Accu-Flex through the Accu-guard, and the other one will not be going through it, and I'll show you how we get that terminated. And then when you're doing it this way, you actually have to go back through the crimp bead, and you want to go through at least one of your beads on the bracelet. That way you're just basically giving it a little extra tail in case it loosen up over time, it doesn't come undone. Oops, well, it's going through my crimp, but not my bead. 1 second here. There we go. Just use my pliers to tighten it up, and as I hold the Accu-guard. Now the neat thing about Accu-guards, it really protects your beading wire. And instead of having your clasp or rub on your actual beading wire, the Accu-Flex gives you a little protection there. So now I'm going to go ahead and crimp this, but before I go and crimp it, I just want to go ahead and look at my bracelet, straighten it out where it needs to be, so it kind of lays as straight as possible. And then making sure that all of the bicones are snug up the way they need to be and not off-centered. Okay, so that's all good. Now I want to go ahead and crimp it. When you're using crimp covers on your project, you want to make sure that when you give yourself enough space, because if you don't, even though you want to have your bracelet nice and tight, you don't want to have it too tight that it kind of kinks it and it doesn't lay nicely on your wrist. Okay? So one of the things that you want to do is once you have your crimps where you want them and stuff, you're going to bend your Accu-guard kind of at an angle on both ends while you're still tightening it. And the reason for that is it gives that just enough space so that when you put your crimp cover in there, it has enough space and it doesn't make your bracelet too tight. Always remember once you crimp it in the half moon shape to go ahead and round off your crimp. That's really what secures everything in place. Okay, and before I cut anything off, I just want to give it a little tug to make sure it's nice and tight. So I always will put a plier in one end of it, so I know that I got a nice good grip, and pull on it, and just make sure that it's not going to give. And it's like, okay, that crimp isn't going anywhere. So now that I have that there, I can go ahead and cut my excess Accu-Flex. I always go as close to the bead as I can. Make sure your flush end is against the bead, so that it cuts it nice and flush. And the same up here. I'm going to cut this before I put the crimp cover on it because I do not want the little tag to be coming out of the crimp cover. And same thing, just kind of tug on it and crimp and cut. Now let's go ahead and put the crimp cover on it. Okay, so here's our bracelet. We are ready to add the clasp. And as I mentioned earlier, we are using the magnetic mag lock clasp, but I just wanted to show you this one here before I finish this bracelet, where I use the same bracelet, but instead I use a lobster clasp. So you do have options. You can change, you do not have to make exactly what you're seeing here. Okay, so for this bracelet, it ended up being just a little bit shorter. Jump rings are always my savior because you can then make it the length you need it to be for anybody who's wearing it. So I am going to be adding 3 jump rings on each side, and then I will add the clasp. You can let gravity be your friend when it comes to putting these together sometimes, especially if you have more than one jump ring. Okay, now the other side. There we go. And now we're just going to attach the other side of the clasp. Okay. Now these maglock clasps are really strong. So one of the things you need to know when it comes to clasps, you never want to pull them apart because you can actually take the magnet out. Just remember, magnetic clasps, you want to slide to open them. And then here, my name is Laura Lynn. I want to thank you for joining us today. Have a wonderful day and please stay safe.